When I was young and stupid in Agile, right, 10, 12, 15 years ago, if you said, hey, what is Agile? I used to say, oh, Agile's a theory of feedback systems, right? That's all you really need to understand Agile is. Agile is a set of nested feedback systems such that we find out faster when things are wrong and we change them, right? The central feedback system in Scrum is the bi-weekly sprint review. Every 2 weeks, we go to our customer and say, this is what we built. How wrong are we? Right? And they tell us, oh, well, that's not exactly what I wanted. It's kind of what I wanted. Here's what I need to change. And then I don't throw away 6 months of work. I throw away a week of work. That's the center of Scrum. And if we don't like just that feedback loop, then we have a retrospective to say, what process are we doing? And how do we do feedback on the process to make the process better, right? And if that's not enough feedback loops, then we have a daily stand-up. And our daily stand-up is a feedback on how we're doing getting the stuff done every day, right? It's an inspect and adapt. And if Scrum's not enough, then I have a DevOps pipeline, and my DevOps pipeline runs the tests every time I check code in. That can be hourly, right? You can check code in every hour and check to make sure there's nothing wrong with the code according to everything I've written down so far. Is that not good enough? Okay, I've got unit tests. Unit tests are things that I run every 5 minutes, maybe more often than that. And so if I'm doing unit testing as a TDD style unit testing, not just unit tests in general, but if I'm doing TDD, then I've got a 5-minute feedback cycle going on in terms of checking whether the code's right. And if that's not good enough, well, we can do pairing. And pairing is a second level feedback system where if I type something wrong and I'm paired with Katrine, Katrine tells me that I'm wrong. Right? And so there's all of these magnificent feedback systems. And at one point, a buddy of mine and I, a couple buddies of mine and I sat down and wrote down 100 distinct feedback systems that we tend to like to use in how we're getting feedback from where and the paths and how we try to correct it. So, excellent. Wow, more questions. I'm gonna try and address some of these in the pause. In the retro, my personal experience is if we know the goal of a retro is twofold. The first part of a retro, we are trying to get a temperature check on the team. A temperature check saying, hey, this week was good for me. Does everybody think the same as me, or did somebody think this week sucked? Right? That's a really important part of the retro. So the first part of the retro is, hey, how is everybody doing? And the second part of the retro is, what should we change for our next cycle? Right? That's the two parts of the retro, right? Or at least my understanding of the purpose of the retrospective is become aware of how we are and propose something that we can try for the next time to see if we can get better. Remember, I'm pretty serious about the progress thing, right? And the retro is the built-in progress technique for the Agile method. So that's my goal. I've had people do different retros for me, right? The most notable one I remember was the ship, what's pushing us forward through the sails and what's pulling us back as an anchor, and that one. But I mean, I've run the same retro for several years, and I've had the Scrum Master run the same retro for several years with the team where I don't have a specific thing. The team I trust to say, no, how are things going? Let's actually look at it. And how are things, and what should we try changing? And sometimes you get things like, hey, you know what I really want to try changing? I want us to go out to lunch once a week, right? Okay. And sometimes I get, hey, you keep talking about that TDD thing. I think we should try it, right? And like, I get out of the way of retros as fast as I can. This is for the team to figure out what's going right and what's going wrong. It sometimes takes a few months before the team engages in the retro. I'll give you that, right? Sometimes teams don't engage in the retro. Sometimes management shuts down the effectiveness of the retro. Sometimes you're not able to make any of the changes. Sometimes the team just wants to talk about what's wrong with the other guys and doesn't want to talk about themselves at all or what they can do, right? Those are all issues. But my historical pattern in retros is that I present, here is a technique that I use, here is the purpose, and then I get out of the way. More specifically, y'all may not know, I wrote a book on the topic of ceremony and the design of ceremony, right? You can look it up. It's by Aretae and Malash. It's a cheap Kindle book, wherein I basically focus on the notion that ceremonies exist to provide social habits and entrain us into behaviors. But the single most important thing about making a ceremony work is that it is emotionally engaging. If you don't have something that captures the humanity, the emotion of the participants, then as soon as you turn around, they're going to stop doing it, right? And so what I need is the ability to design ceremonies and update ceremonies until the team gets emotionally involved with the ceremony and they walk out of these ceremonies having encountered, having participated emotionally, and the ceremony provides value to the organization. And if I'm doing both of those, then I just get out of the way, right? We've got a habit, it's providing emotional value to the participants and it's providing value to the organization. I get out of the way. And if it's not doing that, then I harass the members at the end of every ceremony I do, whether it be a stand-up or a retro. I like to ask questions. These questions are in my book, but you don't need to buy the book to get them. The questions are, did this ceremony accomplish its job? What were we trying to do with the ceremony? What was the goal? What was the value proposition? And did we do it? Right? A stand-up's value proposition is synchronization. I am trying to synchronize with my team so that we can be more effective today. That's the purpose of stand-up. Great. So at the end of stand-up, I say, hey, everybody remember what the purpose is? Did we do it? Question 2, was it worth the time we spent? Time, money, whatever. Was it worth what we spent on it? Right? In the case of a stand-up, 15 minutes, 8 people, sounds to me like that was, I can't count, 2 hours of time, 2 hours of person time spent. Was that worth 2 hours of our week to do that amount of synchronization collectively? Yes, I mean, we should really take that seriously. And then question 3 is, how energized are you? As we're leaving the ceremony, how are you feeling? Right? At the end of some days, if I do a sprint review at the end of the day, a lot of the times at the end of a day on Friday, people will go, yeah, I'm drained. What that tells me is that if I stop making them do it, they'll skip it. Maybe not the first time, but the fifth time. And so what I'm trying to do is build a set of, my new word for it is seams after genes and memes, a self-sustaining, self-replicating set of ceremonies that will persist because they are valued by the participants. And so I spend a lot of time on my ceremonies trying to make sure they are actually valuable to the participants. And so I don't run into most of the problems that I hear about in retros where we have to try all these different things. I say, okay, here's what I'm doing. Is it providing the value? What can we change to make it provide the value? Right? I articulate the value proposition straight up and I say, are we doing it? Is it worth the time? And how are you feeling at the end of it? And if those don't answer well, if I do fist of 5 for the questions, right? And if they don't answer well, we start fixing, okay, great. So great, this ceremony isn't working. How do we fix it? How do we achieve this value for good time and make it worthwhile for this team? Very long answer to your question, Dombadi. I don't know if that's how I say your name or you want me to. If you want to follow up, that's okay.
I think we're okay for now. Thank you.
Certainly. Good question. I mean, it's a topic I like. Angel, how does Agile work in infrastructure and service management environment? So, a lot of the times people try to fit Agile frameworks on, and I've run into a lot of people who have trouble. Like fitting Scrum into service management tends to just make everybody angry, right? Because Scrum is a fixed service. If you have service tickets that tend to sit around for a month, then you can predict what you're going to do for 2 weeks. If you don't have service tickets that sit around for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks and you need to solve them when they come in, then doing the kind of time-boxed predictability that we have in Scrum doesn't actually address the problems you're really facing, right? And so most people in a service management approach tend not to succeed by using Scrum. They tend to move in a Kanban direction instead. This is what happens in my experience in the industry. Having said that, I would like to suggest that whereas you might wish to start with something like Kanban, I've recently said frameworks are nice like trellises for grapes. They help your Agile vine grow in the direction you would like it to grow in. But the trellis isn't the vine. The vine, it goes kind of in weird directions a lot of the time, and the trellis is support for it. And so I would strongly recommend that you take principle seriously. Hey, are you addressing these problems? Are you addressing quality? In infrastructure, the big problems for me are builds take a long time and it worked on my machine, right? Those are the giant problems I run into in infrastructure. And so my question is, how do I start solving the problems for real? And DevOps has a bunch of fancy words, but the answers come down to, hey, I want to make it easier to do deployments and I want to make our checks more automated, right? And I really, really don't want to use specific physical machines that aren't auto-configured, because if I touch configuration, then somebody else is going to touch the configuration and then my stuff's going to break, right? So I'm not certain if I addressed your question, but I hope I was close. Right? I don't like walking in with a framework. I like walking in saying, what problems do we have? and what solutions can I use. Progress, us theory, and focus is huge. I've seen the biggest problems I've seen in a lot of service management are insufficient attention to focus, right? Hey, are we working on the most important thing? Or did I pick up a ticket and I'm supposed to work on it till I'm done? Or I've got 7 tickets and I'm supposed to solve all of them. We don't have serious prioritization going on. I'm back on feedback. Feedback is what I used to say Agile was all about. These days, feedback is a part of Agile. If you don't have good feedback systems, if you're not doing feedback system design, I don't think you're taking the problem seriously, right? What are you building to find problems sooner and make the cycle time between problem identification and solution faster? That's a big chunk of what we're trying to do. A lot of those are built into some techniques, but a lot of times we're not taking the serious feedback centricity of it seriously.